But you don't have to tell them.
All right. The final part of chapter 7 talks about cell transport. Okay, up to this point, we've been talking a lot about organelles. Now, we're actually talking a little more in depth about how things move in and out of the cell. Okay, so there are 3 different ways you can move things in and out of a cell. One is called passive transport. One is called active transport. And one is called bulk transport. Okay. Passive transport, the stuff that moves into a cell or out of a cell by passive transport doesn't need energy to do it. In other words, it does not need ATP. It does not need energy to move in and out of the cell. I'll talk about that today. Active transport is different. In order to move these substances by active transport, you better have some ATP or energy around. And bulk transport is kind of similar to active transport because you need energy, but the materials that move by bulk transport, well, look at the word as the word describes. You know, if you go to a bulk food store, you're buying a lot of it. Okay, you're basically moving something really big in or out of the cell. Excuse me. Okay, so today, the only thing I'm focusing on today is passive transport. So I'm going to talk about 3 different forms of passive transport. Remember, all of these forms I'm going to be talking about don't require energy. You guys have heard these words before. That's the good news. Diffusion. Well, if any of you have ever been around someone who has like a ton of perfume on or a ton of cologne on.
Yes.
Okay, you're witnessing diffusion there. Here's what I mean by that. Oops. Okay, perfume. If I have a bottle of perfume and I just smash it on the floor right here, eventually that smell's going to make its way all the way to Kirsten. Okay, especially if the bottle's big enough. All right, but how the solutes move, how those molecules, how those perfume molecules move is actually what's important here. Substances that move by diffusion always move from a high to low concentration. In other words, they're really concentrated here, and they're going to move to where they're not so concentrated. That's how they spread out. Okay. Another way. Let's say I'm taking this beaker of water, and all I do is add a drop of food coloring to it. Okay? Those molecules of blue food coloring are going to move by diffusion through the beaker of water. They're going to move from where there is a lot of them, concentrated form, high concentration, to where there's not so many of them, lower concentration. Okay. By the way, we talked last year, believe it or not, about why molecules do this. Remember that word kinetic energy? Okay. Kinetic means motion. Well, those blue molecules, those blue food color molecules are moving. Every time they move, they're hitting each other and hitting the surrounding water. That's kind of their driving force for moving. Okay, so the kinetic energy of the molecules is what has them spread out. But there's no energy being input. Now, granted, if I heat it up, it'll go faster. You know, if I heat that solution up. But no energy required. It just does it on its own. Natural diffusion. Okay. In a cell, let's talk in a cell though. The substances that move by diffusion are going to slip right through that lipid bilayer. Remember that lipid bilayer of phospholipids? And the type of things that can move by diffusion are oxygen and carbon dioxide. Remember, cells mini cells need oxygen on their insides. They got to find a way to get it in. The nice thing about oxygen is it can just slip right through by diffusion, right through the cell. It's tiny, and it's not charged, so it's going to slip right through that phospholipid bilayer. Guys, remember what that phospholipid bilayer is. Remember we talked kind of about the little balloons with two tails? That's the phospholipid bilayer. It's going to slip right through there. Okay. However, some materials, some substances aren't as lucky. They can't just slip right through the lipid bilayer. They have to go a different way. It's something called facilitated diffusion. F-A-C-I-L-I-T-A-T-E-D. Facilitated diffusion. Okay, it's diffusion, hence the name, diffusion. So substances are still moving from high to low concentration, but they need a little help. If you guys know what the word facilitate is, if you facilitate something, you help it out. Facilitated diffusion is basically you have diffusion, but it's almost like it needs just a little bit of a helper. And it's a transport protein. Remember, in a membrane, you not only have phospholipids, you have these proteins embedded there too. Well, this is one of their jobs, is to move some of this stuff through. Here's examples of some stuff that moves by facilitated diffusion. Potassium ions. Okay, in humans, potassium ions are needed to conduct nerve impulses. So you better make sure those things can get in and out of the cell. Otherwise, you'd be in a lot of hurt. Glucose. Okay, glucose is a pretty big molecule. It's not going to be able to slip through the phospholipid barrier. It needs a little help. Now, it still doesn't need any energy to move through, but it needs to move through a protein. Amino acids. Okay, who remembers what that word means? If I take a bunch of amino acids and link them together, what am I getting? You could, but an enzyme is a which type of molecule is an enzyme? You're close, Kirsten. If you link a bunch of amino acids together, guys, you get yourself a protein. That's important. Remember, proteins were one of the 4 macromolecules. Okay. Well, your cells better have a supply of amino acids. Remember, I kept saying from the beginning of the year, we are big bags of proteins. That's what our cells are designed to do. Just make and pump out these proteins. Well, you better have the amino acids in a cell so that it can build up and make these proteins. Otherwise, you won't be able to make any proteins. Big picture here, guys. I want you to understand, when you eat protein, okay, when you eat a piece of chicken or a piece of steak or beans or seeds or whatever thing has a lot of protein in it, hope you guys understand that you're eating this protein. It's going to go in your digestive system. Your digestive system is going to break it down and rip it apart. After your digestive system gets through with it, you're going to have a bunch of amino acids. Okay, it's basically what happens to protein when it's ripped apart. It's the small parts of a protein. Well, those amino acids then are going to get sent back into the cells of your body to make new proteins that your body can actually use. So they say to get protein in your diet, but the protein you're eating needs to be broken down and built back up into the different kinds of protein that you actually can use. So that's kind of how it works. So amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. Water also moves this way. Believe it or not, water can also move by diffusion, but water actually moves better by facilitated diffusion.
I noticed that.
What'd you say?
The thing on your board, Brown's Law.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, they lost their bagels.
I know. Oh, yes, that's right. My Bengals fan here. Yeah.
You guys are dirty, I'll tell you what.
I actually, it's sad when you're a Browns fan and you get beat by the Bengals, but you still are disappointed because at least the Browns really didn't embarrass themselves that bad like they have been in the past years. So
You guys are dirty.
I'm not dirty. Why?
Dude, you guys blasted our number 85 across. He was defenseless. He was going up to catch the ball and you took a helmet to the chin. Whatever.
Hey, if we can't win, we're going to hurt people.
And he came back in the game, but he was rolling around on the ground. It took 3 players to get him off the field. He was like knocked out.
I know. Okay, a word I know you guys all know. Osmosis.
I don't know that.
Again, I'm still talking passive transport. So, to be honest, osmosis doesn't need energy. When you hear the word osmosis, I want this word to pop into your head immediately: water. Because osmosis is the movement of water from high to low concentration. Okay. Do not confuse this with diffusion. With diffusion, we were talking about solutes moving, for the most part. We're talking about things like salt or sugar or perfume or food coloring, something that are particles moving. When it comes to osmosis, the only thing that you're asked, when you're asked to talk about osmosis, you are only talking about water moving, and that's it. Also, one more thing. Through a barrier. In order for osmosis to apply, you've got to be moving through something. Sometimes that barrier is the plasma membrane, like it is in cells. That would be a barrier. Sometimes a barrier, it could even be like a bag of some kind that allows water to pass through it. Believe it or not, like some kind of dry cleaning bags you can move water through it. Anyway, anything that water can pass through is a barrier. Anybody watch yesterday on TV? I was watching The Blind Side. Speaking of football, it is a good movie.
Very good.
Okay, but I don't know. You guys probably don't pay attention to the same things in movies that I pay attention to. But anyway, during the movie, the Big Mike was asked. You remember when he first arrived at the school, he was having trouble. Okay, he was having trouble in school. He wasn't used to going to a school. Okay, he wasn't used to doing that. And he had a science teacher who kind of seemed to take a liking to him and kind of realized that he just doesn't learn the same way as everybody else. So she started basically kind of asking him some questions. And do you remember one of the questions she actually asked him was, so Big Mike, what is osmosis? You guys don't remember that part of the movie, do you?
I bet you answered it wrong.
I watched it last night, right?
You're okay. No, it's funny. I mentioned this in the other class, and Riley's like, I don't pay attention to that parts of the movie. But she did. His science teacher said, okay, Big Mike, because she was kind of reading the test to him and seeing what he knew and what he didn't know. And she said, what's osmosis? And he said, wait a minute. He said, wait a minute, I know that one. He's like, that has to do with water moving through a barrier. And I was like, going, sweet. Yeah, so.
Well, he's smarter than I am.
No. But anyway, osmosis. Okay, here's the kind of things I want you guys to be able to do.
Oh yeah, I don't want to go to college to play football.
To play football.
Okay, here's the kind of questions I'm going to need for you guys to know how to do. Let's say I have a beaker of solution. Okay, I've got a solution here, and basically I'm going to call it a 3% salt solution. All right, so it's water with a little bit of salt in it. All right. Inside this beaker, I have a bag, another kind of membrane, a bag, or a barrier. But inside the barrier is a 10% salt solution. All right, so outside of the bag, I have a 3% salt solution. Inside, I have a 10% salt solution. Which one of those solutions is more concentrated with salt? The 10%. Very good. Okay, so basically, the 10% would be saltier. Okay, now be real careful here, because in a question like this, I'm going to want you to figure out which way the water is going to move. You have to flip-flop it in your mind, though. Water's the only thing doing the moving, not the salt. The salt's not moving across the barrier. And remember what I said up here. Water wants to move from where there's a lot of water to where there's not a lot of water. So in a 3% salt solution, if I say it's 3% salt solution, hopefully you guys understand that the other 97% is water. if I say I have a 10% salt solution, the other 90% is water. Oops, I'm going to kind of squeeze it in there real quickly. Okay, now compare these. I've got outside of the beaker with 97% water. Inside the bag, I have 90% water. Water's going to want to go from where there's more of it to where it's less of it. So my next question is, which way is water going to move? Is it going to move into the bag, or is it going to move out of the bag? Into the bag. Okay? This confuses a lot of people because they see that it's a higher salt concentration, but by being a higher salt concentration, it has less water in it. Water wants to move from a high to low concentration. It's going to be moving into the bag to where there's not as much water. Let's try another. I'm going to say water moves into bag. Let me try another one. Kind of going the opposite way. Let's have a beaker of water. Or let's make it plain old water. No, I'm not. I'm going to make it a 10% salt solution. Then let's say I have another bag where I have distilled water in the bag. By the way, distilled water, I don't know if you guys realize, you can buy it at Walmart. It's basically just water that's been purified. It has all the solutes taken out of it, so it's very pure water. Okay, so in other words, that's like 100% water.
It's going to move out.
Which way is water going to move?
Out.
Out. It's going to go from an area of high concentration to low concentration. Good. All right. Couple other terms, I'm almost done. Couple other terms associated with this idea, it kind of goes along with this idea. And then I'm done. A lot of times, you'll want to compare one solution to another. Hypotonic solution, hypertonic solution, and isotonic solution. All right, the word hypo is like a prefix for under. Hyper means, actually is kind of a prefix for above. This is kind of how I always remember these words. In other words, okay, we've talked about diffusion or osmosis, and we're talking about comparing two solutions and figuring out which way water is going to move. You can use these words to kind of describe things. Let's say I have a beaker, and I fill it with some water. I'm just going to say it's 100% water. And then let's say I take a little paramecium. The paramecium is like a little one-celled critter, probably very similar to what you saw under a microscope. I think they even have little cilia. They might not have real big cilia. Anyway, imagine it's just an organism. Now remember, inside of organisms aren't pure water. They have a lot of salts and carbohydrates and proteins. So let's say it has basically a 5% of its insides are solutes, whether it's sugars or salts or whatever. Here's how I would use that word, hypotonic. A hypotonic solution is a solution where it has less solutes than what's around it. So I would say this paramecium lives in a hypotonic solution. Okay, basically the environment that paramecium in is hypotonic, under solutes, basically, than what it is. Okay, remember in this situation, this paramecium has to deal with water coming in it all the time. Lucky for that little paramecium, it has a little adaptation to keep that water pumped back out. Okay. Hey, hypertonic. Real quickly, kind of the same idea. It's just the opposite, though. Let's say I have a beaker, and it's a 10% maybe salt solution. And I plop a cell, I don't know, maybe one of my red blood cells or something in there. And this red blood cell only has maybe an 8% salt solution to it, whatever, I would say, look at that. Basically, that cell is living in a hypertonic solution because the solution that surrounds it is high in solutes, has a high salt level. Totally opposite from over here. I said 100% water, so basically that would mean, well, this would be a hypertonic solution. Finally, isotonic's real easy. If I have a 10% salt solution and I plop in a cell that also has a 10% salt solution, they're the same. Iso, the word iso, same. That cell lives in an isotonic solution. Its insides are the same as the outsides. Isotonic solution. Okay. Let's show some pictures. Pictures are good. Oh, by the way, my beakers, the food coloring has diffused through the beaker nicely. Yep.
That'd be gross.
Diffusion. This is a nice picture showing diffusion. The little blue balls are basically representing substances that are on one side of a membrane or another. You'll see in the first picture on the left, there's a lot more outside of the cell than there are in the cell. But through the process of diffusion, you'll eventually get the same number of blue solute particles on both sides of the cell. Okay. Here's one picture. Diffusion. No energy needed. Same thing, another picture of diffusion just out of a different book showing that if you had plopped in a lump of sugar in a beaker of water, it's going to spread out evenly. It'll move by diffusion. No energy needed. Osmosis now, you're dealing with water moving only. I don't really like this picture very much, but for the sake of I don't have another better one. Remember in osmosis, still no energy needed. But you're dealing with two things. You're dealing with water moving only, and you have some kind of barrier. And that's what's kind of in the middle here. There's a lot of water on the left. There's a little bit of water on the right, but what you do see on the right are these larger molecules. That's just salt or sugar or whatever it is. And again, water always wants to move from where there's a lot of it to where there's not a lot of it. And in this case, you'll see water move to the right. Be a net movement of water to the right. I think that's it. There's actually a couple things on the computer I want to show them real quick, if that's okay. Are you? It's just like a little animation. It's kind of a neat way to see the real life application of this stuff.
I feel like this is supposed to fall in my head.
What'd you say?
I feel as if this thing's going to fall on my head.
Nah. I don't think you're going to have to worry about that. Okay, I like this animation because we talked about this. Remember, the whole thing I'm talking about today is the fact that stuff needs to get in and out of a cell. Remember, your cells are like factories. They need the ingredients to make things, and they need to pump out the products when they make them. And I like this little animation because it kind of shows you the different things that need to move in and out of the cell, and it kind of reiterates the fact that they have to move in different ways. Some are easy to move, some are not so easy. This oxygen over here on the right, they're kind of showing you all the things that can move in and out. I mean, more stuff can move in and out, but this is just a sampling. You can see when I press the button for oxygen, basically you have, oxygen moves easy. Oxygen's tiny, no energy required. It just slips right through that phospholipid membrane. Carbon dioxide, same way. Slips right on out. Remember, CO2 is toxic to cells if it builds up and it wants to get the CO2 out. CO2 moves out. Glucose is a little different. Glucose is going to require one of those transport proteins I was telling you about. There's 4 kind of proteins here. They're embedded in the membrane. Remember, they have the big job of moving stuff. Glucose needs to basically use one of those proteins to move through. Potassium does too. Potassium is really, really tiny, so you would think that it would just move through the phospholipid membrane. But it has to go through a protein because it has a charge on it. It's K+. It's a charge. Okay, sodium is a little different. It's a little more complicated for reasons we'll talk about tomorrow. By the way, just let's kind of take a step back here. You're seeing all these big words and you're like, why does the cell need this stuff? Cells need oxygen for cellular respiration. Cells need to get rid of carbon dioxide because it's toxic. Cells need glucose for cellular respiration as well, along with oxygen. Potassium and sodium are a couple of things that your nerve cells need to conduct impulses. So those are kind of important for that use. Water's always needed. Water has the ability to kind of either diffuse right through the cell membrane or go through one of those protein carriers or transport proteins. Enzymes are funny. Enzymes are big. Enzymes are big globs of protein. They have to move out a completely different way that we'll talk about. That's the bulk transport I was telling you about. Move out a different way. Kind of cool though. Too big to slip through one of those proteins or the layer. All right, guys. That's today. For the last 10 minutes of class, I want you to kind of see how much of this you can do. It's not hard.